Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, December 24th, 2020. Merry Christmas Eve. Today we're going to be taking a look at a 2024 map based off the idea that Donald Trump could run for president in 2024, not as a Republican, but as a separated third-party candidate under the America First branch or wing of the Republican Party. America First has been the slogan of Trump's campaign for quite some time now, and it seems to be a message that has been resonating very well with a lot of his core supporters. America First is a statement that was used countless times by politicians, but Donald Trump is the first candidate who I really think could run away with this slogan being tied to him so closely, very close to his, I guess you could say, isolationist view of the country and the way that it should be ran. And I think if he chooses to break away from the Republican Party, there will be a very significant fallout from the GOP support, which makes sense. Donald Trump is the most popular Republican president amongst Republicans in decades. And if he does choose to run as a third-party candidate in 2024, I would be extremely worried if I was a Republican. If I was a Republican operative, I would be extremely worried about that. If I was a Democrat, I would say this is great news because the Democratic Party is the only party that would benefit from this situation. Donald Trump's newly built political party obviously would get their first run at an election, but this would completely separate the GOP from its Trump wing, which is actually a very large amount. We're talking 40 to 50% of Republicans are core, solid Trump voters. They are, with him till the end. And there's a reason why 60% of Republicans today, 60, 70, sometimes 80%, depending on which study you're looking at, of Republicans believe that the election was won by Donald Trump or Joe Biden cheated to win the election, but they still acknowledge Joe Biden's victory. Regardless, that is very dangerous for America. That is very dangerous for our election system, for how people view it in the future. But that's just the unfortunate reality of our country. So let's go ahead and take a look at what would happen, I believe, in 2024 if Donald Trump chooses to run for president. And I do believe Donald Trump would perform better than the GOP in some of these states. I do think that is true. I think that he is going to take a very significant portion of a lot of his base from 2016, from 2020, ride it into 2024, and absolutely could win some electoral votes. But straight off the bat, we'll start off where the Democratic Party would win by safe margins. And honestly, it doesn't look too good for the Republican Party. I mean, when we're talking about the states that should not be safe margins, they will likely be decided by safe margins. And the reason for that is because if Donald Trump chooses to run, like I had mentioned in the beginning, he will take a very large portion away from the Republican electorate. So states such as New Mexico and Colorado and Virginia, even New Hampshire could become safe states on the presidential level. Why? Because let's say the Republican Party would traditionally get 45, 46% of the vote. You break that up, break it in half, it's 23%, and the Democratic Party is at 54%. Look at that margin. Or if the Republican Party, which will probably perform better than Trump in some of these swing states, not so much in some of the other Republican states, though, let's say the Republican Party gets 40% of the vote, the Democratic Party gets 56% of the vote because, let's say, fractured Republicans don't want to vote for either two, and then Trump gets 4% of the vote. I mean, that's a small amount, but it's taking away from the amount that the GOP could be having, making the state, rather than, if you add the numbers together, a 12-point margin victory all the way up to a 16-point margin victory. So even small percentages taken away from the Republican Party or even from Trump as a candidate, it would be enough to make these states safe. So I would actually characterize Minnesota as safe. I would characterize a couple of other states. I would actually, at this point, it'd be very difficult for me to see how, for the Rust Belt, we'll talk about that actually. I guess this is it in terms of safe states. It may not seem too different than what we saw in the 2020 election. We can look back, what happened here. Not as many safe states on this map, but for all of the states characterized so far, I would consider all of them to be safe. And then we can move on to some of the states where I would actually think would be high-end, likely, for the Democratic Party. So in this scenario, you'd have to realize that the Republican Party probably would nominate a traditional GOP candidate. They're not going to nominate someone who's reminiscent of President Trump. They're not going to nominate probably not going to nominate Mike Pence. They're probably not going to nominate someone who served under the Trump administration. If he's taking away those voters, they're probably not going to be voting in these primaries. They're probably not going to want to put up two Trump-like candidates against each other, especially if Donald Trump chooses to run again in 2024 under the America First Party or whatever he would like to call it. And honestly, that's not too far-fetched from what could actually happen. If the Republican Party does not actively seek to overturn the election results, which they haven't, Donald Trump will definitely feel betrayed. And if he's up for a run in 2024, I can imagine him trying to, if he's denied from running in the Republican primary, it's possible that they try to tell him, don't do it. The establishment tells him, do not run again. He will probably still run, just not as a Republican. And that would completely fracture the Republican Party for decades to come. But in this scenario, they would probably nominate a traditional Republican, someone who reminds them a lot of Mitt Romney or John McCain, because those are those traditional Republicans that won in Georgia, that won in Arizona, that won by very large amounts in Texas, that solidified margins in North Carolina. So when you're looking at the candidates that could be running in this map, I would say the Republican Party would probably nominate a traditionalist, and then Donald Trump, of course, would be the more right-wing version of that Republican candidate. But, of course, the Democratic Party probably will run Joe Biden. I mean, a lot of us have been speculating that he's not going to run in 2024, but there's never been really an official report from the Biden campaign that he is not going to run again. He's indicated every single time that he is going to run again, other than the sources that we hear, which sometimes are fairly accurate, sometimes aren't. Generally, they are accurate, though, so I'm not going to bet that Joe Biden isn't going to run in 2024, but I wouldn't be surprised if he chooses not to run. But for right now, I'm going to assume he does run for re-election. He's going to be the incumbent president. It wouldn't be too difficult to win a primary. But enough talking about that. Let's get into the likely states. We're going to actually work down from where the Democrats actually do very well into the areas where the Republican Party or the America First Party could actually perform well. And honestly, the likely states are just going to get better for the Democratic Party. You see, the problem with running a conservative or a conservative Donald Trump type candidate when there is a Republican on the ballot means close races where Joe Biden could be getting 48% of the vote. For example, Florida, 48% of the vote. Let's say the Republican Party gets 35% of the vote, and then Donald Trump gets the remainder. Well, what does that actually put the Republicans? It doesn't put Trump closer to the White House. It doesn't put the Republicans closer to the White House. When that force would be combined, the Republican Party would have 52% of the vote. But since Donald Trump is taking away that support, the Democratic Party would win states such as Florida and North Carolina by likely margins. That is the very real reality of this situation if Donald Trump chooses to run as a third-party candidate. I think he could actually win some states where the Republican Party may want to win. Absolutely would want to win. I think the Republican Party could narrowly win some states just because they have those traditionally minded Republican voters. For example, Utah. I think Utah could be a likely margin, maybe 6 to 10 points in favor of the Republican Party, because while they have voted they voted for Joe Biden by a larger margin than they did by Hillary Clinton by 10 points. But I don't think it's enough to overcome that very large traditional Mormon population. And while Donald Trump would still get a small amount of the vote. Wow, that actually looks very similar to the America First color. That's kind of weird, but you'll see the difference when we go through it. But Utah would probably go to the GOP just because they weren't too happy with Donald Trump before. I can't imagine too many of them would be splitting their vote away, especially if a more traditional Romney-esque type Republican runs on the Republican side. So Utah, that's a state where I would actually say is likely for the GOP. Now, for the Democratic Party, they would actually have the advantage in a number of states. They would have the advantage in a number of Trump states from 2020. And they would be able to do very, very well. Very, very well. Come within very big margins. But we'll talk about the lean states for the Democratic Party in just a moment. Let's actually get into the states where I think Donald Trump could perform well. I think that these are states that you actually shouldn't be too surprised that the Democratic Party could actually come closer, or at least the margins would be much closer. We're talking the Democratic Party receiving 39% of the vote, but somehow being within just a few percentage points of winning, which is the exact nightmare scenario that the Republican Party would try to avoid in this case. But I think Donald Trump could absolutely win in a state such as, Idaho or Wyoming. I think that his base is extremely strong in a number of these very solid red states, and he expanded them. If you look at where Obama, did well in 2008 during his first wave election, look at North and South Dakota. They were decided by single digits. In 2012, Romney moved them over. He won them by 18 points and 20 points. But then 2016 rolls around, and South Dakota goes by 30 points to Trump. North Dakota goes by 36 points to Trump. Fast forward to 2020, it gets a little bit narrower, but nothing super significant. Just a few percentage points. Nowhere near the closeness of it back in 2008. I mean, look at 2008 all the way up to 2020. Donald Trump was able to tap into a very big portion of this voting base, which voted probably for Obama. There were definitely a number of Trump and Obama to Trump voters from 2008 to 2016 to 2020. A lot of those voters that were really in love with the idea of President Trump were in love with the idea of a lot of his policies. And honestly, I could see him taking it away in these states. So when you're looking at North and South Dakota and Wyoming and Idaho, you may be surprised that the Republican Party wouldn't be doing as well. But honestly, is it too far-fetched to see how someone who outperformed many Republicans in the past, actually winning in this election? And in terms of his approval, he's by no means underwater in these states. Plus 28 in North Dakota, plus 21 in South Dakota, plus 36 in Wyoming, plus 26 in Idaho. I would not be shocked if Donald Trump won these states, even with a Republican on the ballot, because this traditional Republican will seem like a rhino to a lot of these voters. I think that rhino status may pay off in some of the other battleground states, but for right now, I would actually say Idaho, Wyoming, North and South Dakota would go to Donald Trump. I would say the same for Oklahoma. I would say the same for West Virginia. You see, when Donald Trump endorses Trump-like candidates in primaries, those candidates typically win. He has endorsed candidates in the past that have not performed well, maybe in Northern Virginia, maybe in a couple of other districts around the country. But if he's running on the presidential ballot, I absolutely see a number of these traditional Republican voters abandoning that party in favor of Donald Trump. It's not a far-fetched idea. It's not something that would never happen. If Donald Trump did run as a third-party candidate, I have no doubt in my mind he would perform better than the Republican Party in numerous states. He would be one of the first third-party candidates to win an electoral vote through an actual electoral process, not through a faithless elector. He would be one of the first in decades, and it's not a far-fetched idea. His base is extremely solid, and if he's able to tap into it, I have no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump could win a number of these states. No doubt whatsoever. No doubt that he would do well in Tennessee, that he would win states such as Kentucky. I think Tennessee could be closer. I think Kentucky would be solid. Solid means anywhere from 15 points plus, but I don't think that the Republican Party would really survive this election. Donald Trump actually may come out, after this, ahead of the Republican Party in terms of electoral votes. Why? Because Donald Trump would take probably a very large portion, if not the majority of Republicans with him, over to this party. And that is not a far-fetched idea. If Trump did run as a third-party candidate, he would push the Republican Party, because his party, I believe, would gain traction. The Republican Party would not. He would push the Republican Party into irrelevancy. This one man could completely rewrite American politics for decades to come. He did it before, and he could absolutely do it again. I have no doubt in my mind that Trump would be inspired to run again just by a few rallies that he holds through 2021, 2022 to 2023. If the Republican Party does not back him up for a potential run in 2024, no doubt in my mind, he would intentionally, knowing what he was doing, run for president in 2024. So I think that Trump would do very, very well. I think he could win in a number of states. I think he would win in Nebraska. I think he would win in Nebraska's 1st district. I think he would win in Nebraska's 3rd district. He would win at large. I think that Nebraska's 1st district could be narrower. I think that the 2nd district would still remain as a likely district, just because traditional Republican on the ballot would definitely help narrow up the margins between Joe Biden and the rest of the candidates. But overall, this map would be a blowout for the Democratic Party. Like I said, I was going to get into the lean states. We're talking Iowa. We're talking Ohio. We're talking Texas. We're talking Maine's 2nd district. Donald Trump would still get a very significant portion of the vote, but Texas, Iowa, Ohio, Maine's 2nd district, no doubt in my mind that they would flip to the Democratic Party in this eventual scenario, because when Donald Trump and a Republican is on the ballot, those traditional Republicans may be, confused about who to vote for in this situation. There are certain states that could actually be very kind to a lot of these Republican voters, but based off what we've seen so far in terms of Trump's support, I don't think that he would fare too well. I don't think the Republican Party would fare too well on this map. So let's go ahead and go through this. Let's talk about the states that I think could be won by the Republican Party, very, very narrowly. It's just going to be very difficult for me to see this type of map. It would be very weird to see. You see all of this America First color, and you think, how does Donald Trump win more than the Republican Party? And you have to recognize that he's very, very popular. He's very, very popular amongst Republicans. In terms of Republicans, I forgot to mention this, but I just realized that, wow, my internet went out mid-video. So that's unfortunate. Hopefully it's back by the time I can pull up the civics map for the Republican Party. But you will see a lot of approval, very, very high, higher than Bush, higher than H.W. Bush. So looking at Donald Trump's approval rating, one of the highest for Republican candidates, for Republican presidents in quite some time now. I think Reagan is the only one that really compares in terms of Republican support. So let's go ahead and move on to some of the states that could be very narrow. I think Montana could be won by the Republican Party very narrowly. I think South Carolina would be very, very close. Very, very close. And I don't think it would be, honestly, I don't think it would be too far-fetched to say. And I know this is going to probably make a lot of people upset. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say this. I'm going to say this. I'm going to put Alaska in the Democratic column. I know what you're probably thinking. Am I crazy? I probably am. But Alaska, I think, if Joe Biden just maintains that 42% of the vote, if Donald Trump just brings the Republican Party down to 41%, 40%, with him getting 11, 12, 13% of the vote, which wouldn't be too far-fetched, Alaska would actually flip blue. Alaska would actually flip blue. That's something that you would be very shocked to see. But in terms of, Trump's very large amount of support, I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised because Alaska was the closest Republican state in this election besides, I believe, Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, and Texas, if I'm not mistaken. I believe those states, and then also Maine 2nd District. But in terms of states, I believe just those states were closer than closer than Alaska. Alaska had a number of states that were much larger in terms of its margin. It was a 10-point margin of victory for Donald Trump. That may seem like a lot, but when Donald Trump and a Republican are on the ballot, it would not be too far-fetched. It would not be too far-fetched whatsoever. And I do think that Donald Trump would perform well as a candidate on his own. I really think so. This reminds me a lot of what happened in New York when AOC primaried the top Democrat, the fourth-ranking Democrat in the entire country, fourth highest Democrat in the entire country. That same Democrat was on the ballot as a Working Families Party candidate, and he only received single digits in terms of his vote. Yes, having someone who represents a political party on the ballot does help a lot of the time, but when you have a new face of a new wing of the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, for example, Donald Trump as AOC was for the Democratic Party with progressives, they will probably still win a lot of that vote because Donald Trump will undoubtedly be the highest well-known name across all of the candidates that could run in 2024, and I think he would actually perform much better than the Republican nominee. If he is on every single ballot, I have no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump would perform better, and I'm saying it now, would perform better than a number of other Republicans and perform better than any Republican that the Republican Party could run. Because Donald Trump would take a very large section of the Republican Party with him, and through the general election campaign process, I think he could actually win a number of core Republican states to a point where the Republican Party could be winning maybe 10 to 20% in terms of support. I get it. Party recognition is everything, but so is name recognition. And Donald Trump is one of the first Republicans to be extremely widely popular amongst his own political party, one of the very few Republican candidates who remain very popular. Mitch McConnell is a well-known name. Paul Ryan is a well-known name. John Boehner is a well-known name. Kevin McCarthy is a well-known name. Are they approved of? No, they're not. Amongst Republicans, yes, but by nowhere near the same margin as Donald Trump. In terms of Mike Pence, he's the closest to Donald Trump, and that's because he served as his VP. So really, I think the Republican Party would try to take the traditionalist route with a lot of the more extreme members of the party leaving in favor of an America First party. We're actually going to go ahead and get rid of the party leans on the side of the screen so we can go ahead and see that. Let's get rid of the chart leans, and then you can actually see how large this victory would be for the Democratic Party. I'm going to finish off this video just by characterizing all of the states with their solid colors just so you can see the entirety of the map, and also some of the reds may be conflicting, so I understand that. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. But in this map, it would be very, very difficult for the Republican Party to perform nearly as well as they did. On their first election bid. So looking at, we're going to see a lot of, bright red. I don't really know what to characterize this, but a lot of bright red. And it would honestly be something that the Republican Party would be dreading. But if Donald Trump does choose to run in 2024, I would honestly say it's inevitable. If he chooses to not run under the Republican Party, I can't imagine a scenario where they would actually perform better than him, just because of the fact that Donald Trump as a figure loved so much amongst the Republican Party that he would do very, very well. Enough so, you're skipping to the end, enough so, you should watch my reasoning about Alaska, enough so that states such as Alaska, Iowa, Ohio, Texas could actually flip to the Democratic Party. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Actually, let me make that the 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.